All right. Let's dive into a piece of history that just never seems to fade away. The JFK assassination.
Yeah.
We've got a stack of articles here from Fair Play magazine.
Okay.
For those who might not know, that's a publication that's really dedicated to examining all the evidence, all the different angles of the assassination. And let me tell you, even if you think you know this case like the back of your hand,
Right.
there are some pretty wild twists and turns ahead.
Oh, I bet.
We're not going to try to solve the whole mystery today, but
Yeah.
think of this as kind of a sneak peek behind the curtain
Right.
at some of the lesser-known details and perspectives.
It's amazing how even decades later, new information, new ways of looking at the assassination just keep popping up. It really makes you rethink everything you thought you knew.
Exactly. And Fair Play magazine was like a central hub for this kind of exploration. So to kick things off, let's talk about something that really shook things up back in '99, the Yeltsin documents.
Ah.
These were files that Boris Yeltsin, he was the president of Russia at the time, gave to President Clinton.
Interesting.
They were supposed to be full of information about Oswald and the assassination,
Okay.
but the initial media coverage was all over the map.
It was a mess. So much confusion.
Yeah.
Conflicting reports about how many documents there actually were, what was in them. Chris W. Courtwright, who wrote about this for Fair Play, was pretty critical of how the media handled it all. He felt like they didn't even have the basic knowledge about the assassination, or about the laws about declassifying documents like these.
It makes you wonder if even the media was having trouble understanding what was going on, what was actually in those files.
Yeah.
Some folks were saying they held, like, the Soviet Union's reactions to the assassination, maybe even some insights into what they knew about Oswald when he was living over there in the USSR. Others were wondering if there was information about Oswald's motives, maybe connections to foreign powers. It's like finding a missing piece of a puzzle, but you have no idea where it fits.
And, this whole situation really showed a big problem. The group that was responsible for overseeing the release of all the documents related to the Assassination Records Review Board, they called it the ARRB.
Okay.
It had actually stopped working just a few months before Yeltsin handed over those files.
Oh, wow. So you're saying there was no clear process for dealing with these new discoveries?
Exactly.
A real legal limbo.
It really highlighted that we need a system that can deal with new evidence, even if it's decades after the event. Courtwright even pointed out that the ARRB, in their final report before they shut down, they hinted that there might be more information hidden away.
Really?
Places like the Mexican government's files, even J. Edgar Hoover's personal files. Who knows what's in there?
It's crazy to think there might be more pieces of the puzzle out there just waiting to be found.
It really is. It makes you think about what else we might not know and who might be holding those answers.
Now, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about something maybe a little bit morbid, but super fascinating. The casket that was used to transport JFK's body.
Oh, wow.
For years, nobody knew where it was. Led to all kinds of speculation. Then some declassified documents came out and revealed that it was sunk in the ocean back in 1966.
Wow.
And it was at the request of the Kennedy family.
Really?
The documents say they wanted to prevent it from being, like, misused or exploited in some way.
I see.
They went through this whole elaborate process to make sure it had a proper final resting place, filling it with sand, drilling holes, even attaching parachutes to soften the impact
No.
before dropping it from a plane into thousands of feet of water.
That's incredible. All that effort.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the secrecy, the level of control surrounding everything to do with the assassination. Even the casket becomes part of this whole web of mystery. What were they trying to protect? Was it just about respecting the deceased, or was there something else, something they didn't want us to find?
Now, get ready for a real mind bender. Fair Play also featured a speech by Gaetan Fonzi. He was an investigator for the House Select Committee on Assassinations.
Okay, yeah.
This guy did not hold back. He straight up said, and I quote, "We know who killed President Kennedy. Why don't you?"
Wow, that's a bold statement.
Fonzi was totally convinced there was a conspiracy. And this statement was like a direct challenge to the official story. He believed that only a really powerful group, like embedded in the U.S. government, could have pulled off the assassination and then covered it up.
He didn't mince words.
Nope. He even accused the media of being complicit in the cover-up because they weren't doing enough to find the truth. He also talked about his own time investigating the Warren Report, which was the official government investigation.
Right.
He said his interviews, especially one with Arlen Specter, who was one of the lawyers on the Warren Commission, convinced him that something was off. The explanations for some of the weird stuff in the report, they just didn't add up for him.
That's a powerful perspective. It's not just someone on the sidelines. This is a guy who was in the thick of it. And his experience led him to believe there was something more going on than what they told us.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that Fonzie admitted he was hesitant to believe in a conspiracy at first. He wanted to believe the official story. But the evidence he kept finding just pushed him in a different direction.
Yeah.
He urged other researchers to, shift their focus, stop trying to solve a mystery, and start reinforcing what they already knew to be true.
It's a call to action, to stop accepting the official story and really dig into the evidence, even if it leads to some uncomfortable conclusions.
I mean, let's rewind a bit, back to 1964, just a few months after the assassination. A lawyer named Vincent Salandria came out and publicly challenged the Warren Report's findings.
Very interesting.
His argument was really smart. He said if the assassination was as simple as the report made it seem, all the facts would fit together perfectly.
Yeah.
But they didn't. Salandria was one of the first people to really criticize the official narrative, and he did it loud and clear. He pointed out all these contradictions in what the witnesses were saying.
Like what?
Like how many shots were fired and where they came from. Some witnesses said they heard shots from a completely different spot than the Texas school book depository where Oswald was supposedly shooting from. There was other stuff that didn't make sense either. Some people said they smelled gunpowder near a grassy knoll, which, if you look at Dealey Plaza, it means the shots couldn't have just come from the book depository.
Interesting.
And then there's James Tague, this bystander who got hurt during the shooting. The evidence shows he was hit by a bullet fragment that bounced off a curb.
Okay.
But if the shots only came from the book depository, that curb wouldn't have been in the line of fire. These little inconsistencies, even if they seem small, they make you wonder if the whole story is really accurate.
Yeah, it's like pulling on a thread and the whole thing starts to unravel.
Exactly. Salandria also took a close look at the Zapruder film, the one that caught the assassination on camera.
Right.
He argued that the way Governor Connolly reacted, or didn't react, didn't line up with the single bullet theory that the Warren Commission came up with.
The single bullet theory.
Yeah. They said one bullet hit both Kennedy and Connolly. But Salandria said Connolly's body didn't move in a way that would make sense if he'd been hit by a high-speed bullet. Salandria even said there is no way Oswald could have made 3 accurate shots from his rifle in the time the Warren Commission said he did. He asked them to actually try and recreate what Oswald supposedly did, using moving targets to make it more realistic. Seemed reasonable, but they resisted.
Which, of course, just makes people even more suspicious.
Right. And speaking of the Zapruder film, there's been a lot of debate about if it's even real, if it's been messed with. Fair Play presented 2 different views on this. Josiah Thompson, who's a well-known JFK researcher, argued pretty strongly that the film is authentic. He said changing the film would have been almost impossible because there were so many other films and photos taken that day, not to mention all the eyewitnesses.
Right. It's not like you could just sneak in a few altered frames and hope nobody would notice.
Plus, he said the Zapruder family always had a first-generation copy of the film, so it couldn't have been changed easily. But, like with most things in this case, there's a counter-argument.
Right, of course.
Gerald Smith, another researcher, he said, yeah, it would be hard to change the film, but it's not impossible. He thought there might have been a chance for someone to mess with it before it was released to the public. He also questioned if Zapruder's own testimony about who had access to the film was accurate. So there's doubt about if there really was a first-generation copy that was kept safe the whole time.
Interesting. It really shows how much every single detail of this case has been scrutinized.
And remember, the government ended up buying the Zapruder film for $16 million.
$16 million. That says something about how important they thought it was, even with all the questions about if it's authentic.
Yeah.
It's a piece of history we can't seem to turn away from.
It's a window into one of the most important moments in American history, a moment that still fascinates and, haunts us even now.
It does. Welcome back to our deep dive into the JFK assassination research.
Yeah.
Through the lens of Fair Play magazine.
Going through these articles, one thing really struck me. The passion these researchers had, it was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't just like an intellectual puzzle for them. It was this deeply personal quest for the truth. no matter how uncomfortable it might be.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to see their dedication. They challenged the official narrative,
Yeah.
even when it was, really unpopular.
I was especially drawn to Josiah Thompson's article about the Zapruder film.
Right.
He wasn't just focused on the film itself, but on a much bigger point about how we approach research and inquiry in general. He was really critical of people who dismissed certain researchers or their theories just because they didn't have the right credential.
Oh, interesting. Like they didn't come from a specific background or something.
Yeah, exactly. Thompson believed that the evidence, the logical arguments, those are what should matter, not someone's background or their degrees.
I see.
He felt like anyone, whether they're a historian, a scientist, or even just someone with no formal training at all, could contribute valuable insights as long as they were willing to, really engage with the evidence and think critically.
It's like you were saying, don't shut down a conversation just because someone doesn't have a fancy title.
Exactly. He really believed in the power of diverse perspectives. Thompson even talked about his own experience as part of this early community of JFK researchers back in the 60s. Back then, questioning a Warren report was almost taboo.
Yeah, it was a different time. Challenging the official narrative could really get you in trouble.
He described how this group of researchers, they were all united by their desire for the truth. They would collaborate, support each other, even though they came from totally different backgrounds. People like Mary Farrell, Penn Jones Jr., Sylvia Meagher. These folks played a huge role in keeping those alternative perspectives alive.
It's interesting how that happens. Even today, you see these online communities forming around unsolved mysteries or alternative theory.
Yeah.
People coming together, sharing information, and pushing the boundaries of what's considered acceptable knowledge.
It really shows our human curiosity, that desire to understand the world around us and to question what we're told, even if it challenges authority.
Absolutely. Speaking of questioning what we're told, Fair Play also mentioned this really interesting thing. They had installed a live webcam in the Texas School Book Depository,
Oh, wow.
pointed directly out of the window where Oswald supposedly fired those shots.
Can you imagine being able to look out that window, seeing Dealey Plaza as it is today, and trying to put yourself in that moment?
Yeah. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? This historical event, frozen in time, but with the present day right there on top of it. It makes the history feel more real somehow.
Definitely. But not everyone was happy about the webcam.
Why not?
Some people thought it was exploitative, disrespectful, turning Dealey Plaza into this macabre tourist attraction.
I can see that. It does make you think about how we commemorate tragic events. Is it possible to make history accessible without, making it into a spectacle?
Right. The Sixth Floor Museum, which is in the book depository, they said the webcam was supposed to be educational, a way to encourage people to think more deeply about the event and what it means.
Okay.
They saw it as a tool for learning, not for, morbid curiosity.
It's a tricky balance, isn't it? Technology can be used to engage with history, but it can also be misused. And it's something we're still grappling with today with all the virtual tours and online archives and stuff.
And get this, Senator Arlen Specter, the guy who helped come up with the single bullet theory for the Warren Commission, he actually went on a trip to Cuba.
Yeah.
And not just any trip. He met with Fidel Castro.
Wow, that's pretty significant given his involvement in the JFK case.
It makes you wonder what they talked about. I mean, the assassination had to have been a big topic, right?
It's fascinating to imagine that conversation. Two people so deeply connected to this historical event, each with their own perspective.
This visit happened at a time when there was a lot of talk about revisiting the JFK case, maybe even trying to improve relations between the U.S. and Cuba.
It could have been a step towards more transparency, more dialogue, acknowledging that maybe there are still unanswered questions about the assassination.
Now, something a little different. Fair Play mentioned this weird incident where a guy got arrested for vandalizing the John F. Kennedy Memorial in Dallas.
Oh, wow. What happened?
He spray-painted swastikas and also, get this, happy faces. It seemed really strange and disrespectful.
That is odd.
The article said the guy's lawyer argued that he wasn't motivated by hate or anything political. He said it was because of a mental health condition.
I see.
And the judge actually declared him incompetent to stand trial and ordered him to get treatment at a state hospital. It's a reminder that sometimes these acts that seem senseless, they can have deeper, more complicated causes.
Absolutely. It's important to understand the context, the reasons behind these actions, not just jump to punishment.
Now let's talk about the CIA. Fair Play had an article about their role in the events leading up to the assassination. based on some newly declassified documents.
Okay.
And the picture they paint of the CIA back then is, well, kind of messy.
A bureaucratic mess.
Yeah. The article described all this frantic communication between CIA stations in Florida, Mexico, and Cuba, all related to Operation Mongoose, which was this covert operation to try to get rid of Castro.
Right.
It was a really tense time. And the article suggests that the CIA was under huge pressure to get results.
Makes sense.
They even hinted that the CIA might have been involved in plots to assassinate Castro.
Wow, those rumors have been around for a long time. But to see it suggested in official documents, that's pretty amazing.
It's a controversial topic for sure, but it does raise some important questions about, who's responsible when it comes to covert operations.
Yeah, how much oversight should there be?
What struck me was how the article portrayed the CIA. They weren't this all-powerful, shadowy organization. They were more like a bureaucracy with all the internal power struggles and red tape you'd expect in any big government agency. It made them seem more human, which actually makes their actions seem even more complicated, morally ambiguous.
It's a good point. Even within these powerful institutions, it's still individuals making decisions, facing pressure. It's never as simple as good guys and bad guys.
But despite all that chaos, one thing was clear. The CIA was taking its orders from the White House. They weren't just acting on their own.
Right, that's important to remember. It puts the responsibility on the elected officials.
The article ultimately argues that it was President Kennedy, not the CIA, who was responsible for what the agency did in Cuba, and for any dangerous consequences that came after. It's a sobering thought. It's like, the CIA might be the one pulling the trigger, but the president is the one aiming the gun.
That's a powerful way to put it. It really underscores the need for transparency and accountability in government, especially when it comes to things like covert operations and intelligence agencies.
Fair Play also had a section with updates on different things happening with the JFK case. It's a reminder that this investigation, in a lot of ways, is still going on. New information keeps coming out, new interpretations. The debate never really ends.
It's fascinating how this event continues to captivate people, even after all these years.
For example, they mentioned that audio recordings of the Assassination Records Review Board presentations and meetings are now available to the public.
Oh, wow.
That's a huge win for researchers.
Yeah, it gives them a chance to hear how the board thought about things, how they went about trying to find the truth.
And get this, they even mentioned that the JFK Library and Museum in Boston was having problems with leaks.
Leaks? Like water leaks.
Yeah. Apparently, it was so bad that during rainstorms, they had to put buckets all over the place to catch the drips.
Kind of ironic, isn't it? This building dedicated to preserving history, and it can't even keep the rain out. But it's also a reminder that even the most carefully preserved historical stuff is fragile. Time takes its toll.
It makes the work of researchers even more important. Got to get that information before it's lost forever.
Absolutely. It's a race against time.
We've covered a lot of ground here, but we've still got more to explore in our Fair Play journey. We'll be right back after a quick break.
We're back, wrapping up our deep dive into Fair Play magazine and its take on the JFK assassination.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. We've talked about secret documents, debated if crucial evidence is even real, and even, thought about the fate of a sunken casket. But through it all, one thing keeps coming back to me. We have to question our assumptions and look for different perspectives.
Absolutely.
It's so easy to get caught up in one narrative, especially with a case as complicated and emotional as the JFK assassination.
Right. But Fair Play really wanted readers to think critically and consider different interpretations.
And they did a good job of that.
They had a whole section dedicated to book reviews.
Okay.
Covering all sorts of books about the assassination, some that backed up the Warren report, some that put forward all sorts of conspiracy theories.
So a good mix.
Yeah. Fair Play didn't shy away from showing these different points of view and let readers decide for themselves what to believe. They even reviewed books about the assassinations of other big figures from that time, like Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr.
It's important to look at those connections, right?
Yeah.
It helps us understand the bigger picture, the social and political climate back then. The 60s were a crazy time.
Totally. It's like trying to understand one little brushstroke without looking at the whole painting. You got to see the whole thing to get the full meaning.
Makes sense.
And Fair Play didn't stop there. They also had a directory of researchers and organizations working on the JFK case. It was like a who's who of the assassination research world.
A great resource for people who want to learn more.
It helped connect people who are passionate about uncovering the truth.
Right. And it shows that even with such a controversial and complex event, there's a whole community of people dedicated to finding answers. These folks, some of them have spent their whole lives on this. It's a testament to how powerful this event was, how important it is to keep searching for justice.
Exactly. It makes you realize that this isn't just about history, it's about real people, their dedication to understanding this tragedy that impacted the whole nation. And it brings us back to that powerful statement from Gaetan Fonzi: "We know who killed President Kennedy, why don't you?" Whether you agree with him or not, his words are a challenge to keep questioning, keep searching, keep the conversation going.
The JFK assassination, it's not just a date in the history book. It's a mystery, a turning point for America. And it's up to each of us to decide what we believe. Hopefully, this deep dive has shown you that there's always more to learn, more angles to consider when it comes to the JFK assassination. It's a case that keeps us fascinated, keeps us thinking.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll finally have all the answers.
Maybe.
But until then, the search for the truth continues. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Fair Play magazine and the mystery surrounding the JFK assassination.